And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Well, next low pressure area moving eastward here across the Bering Sea, pushing rain into the southwest interior, down to the Alaska Peninsula, up to Kodiak Island, and eventually into southern Cook Inlet and into the southern Kuskokwim Valley. Scattered showers central eastern part of the state. And then for tomorrow, this front pushes eastward here into the Gulf of Alaska with rain across southern Alaska, showers in the central interior to the northeast, still some light snow for the Brooks Range, and drying out with increasing clearing periods over the southeast coast, less in the way of showers. That doesn't last long as this front pushes more rain in for a wet start to the weekend for the southeast coast as well as the North Gulf Coast. Still pretty cloudy and showery and cool here across southern Alaska up into the Tanana Valley. Some sunshine back here to the northwest and gusty northwest winds over the eastern Bering Sea to the Alaska Peninsula. And for the coastal water forecast here for the south coast of the Panhandle, northwest winds 10 to 15 knots. Variable winds 5 to 10 knots for the central coast, and the north coast looking at east-southeasterlies at 10 to 15 knots. Lynn Canal winds mostly south at about 10 knots tomorrow, with Friday looking winds light here for the central and southern inside channels out of the northwest at about 10 knots with seas 2 feet. And then for Saturday, south to southeast winds 20 knots for the south coast. Central coast, southeast 20 to 25 knots, turning east at 20 to 25 knots up along the North Gulf Coast. And southeast winds 10 knots for Lynn Canal, south at 10 for Stevens Passage. Southeast winds 20 knots for Clarence Strait with seas there at about 4 feet. And for Prince William Sound tomorrow, southeast winds 15 knots, seas 3 feet. In northern Cook Inlet, light variable winds. Southern Cook Inlet, not much different, mainly east at 10 knots. Northwest 15 there for Kamishak Bay, variable 15 for the Barren Islands. And the North Gulf Coast, variable winds at 20 knots. And then for Saturday, Prince William Sound, northeast winds 15 knots, east winds 20 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast, turning northeast at 20 knots for the west side. Barren Islands, northwest at north at 15, northwest 15 for Kamishak Bay, and Cook Inlet, winds staying light from the north and northeast at about 10 knots with seas 2 to 3 feet. And for Kodiak Island Friday, southwest winds 20 to 25 knots. Alaska Peninsula, small craft advisories for southwest winds 25 to 30 knots, southwest to 20 for Bristol Bay, with seas there at about 5 feet. And then for Saturday, Kodiak Island, variable to northwest winds, not too bad at 10 to 15 knots. Alaska Peninsula, northwest or west northwesterlies, 20 to 25 knots for the first day of the weekend here, 5 to 10 foot seas, and west at 15 for Bristol Bay with seas at 5 feet. And for the eastern Aleutians, west-southwest winds, 25 to 30 knots tomorrow, seas up to 13 feet. Adak and Atka, west at 25, and then becoming a little lighter and more variable as you head west there over the western Aleutians. And then for Saturday, east-southeast winds here, 15 to 25 knots for the western Aleutians. Adak and Atka, northwest at about 15 knots. And small craft advisories here for the eastern Aleutians, northwest 25 to 30 knots, seas running 7 to 10 feet. And for the Kuskokwim Delta Coast on Friday, southeast at 15 knots, east at 10 for the Yukon Delta Coast, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, northeast winds 15 knots. Pribilof Islands, west winds 25 knots, so seas up to 13 feet, north at 20 knots for St. Matthew Island with 9-foot seas. And then for the day on Saturday, Pribilof Islands, northwest at 25 knots, northwest at 20, St. Matthew Island, southwest coast, northwest 20 to 25 knots, north winds 20 knots for Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island. And for the Chukchi Sea tomorrow, we've got north to northeast winds at 15 knots, brisk wind advisories here for the western Arctic coast, or actually small craft advisories and gales for the western Arctic coast for northeast winds 25 to 35 knots. Central, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, northeast at 15. And then for Saturday, small craft advisories here for the Chukchi Sea for north to northeast winds, 25 to 30 knots. Western Arctic coast, northeast at 20. North winds, 15 knots for the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coastline.